The power went out at exactly 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in Phoenix, Arizona. And I knew immediately that my home office setup was about to become a very expensive paperweight unless I acted fast. I'm Wesley Barnes, a software consultant who works from home in the Saguaro Springs subdivision, a gated community that prides itself on manicured lawns and strict HOA regulations. When the lights flickered and died, I was on a video call with a client in New York who was paying me $300 an hour. The timing couldn't have been worse. I had deadlines, servers to maintain, and a reputation to protect. Within 10 minutes, I had my backup generator wheeled out from the garage. It was a Champion 7,500-watt portable generator, purchased specifically for situations like this. Arizona summers were brutal, and power outages happened more often than anyone wanted to admit. I had spent nearly $2,000 on that machine, plus another $500 on proper installation equipment and safety features. The generator hummed to life in my backyard, positioned on the concrete pad I had poured specifically for it. I had followed every rule, every guideline. I had even submitted the proper paperwork to the HOA 6 months ago when I bought it, requesting approval for the concrete pad and the generator storage. I never heard back, which according to the HOA bylaws meant automatic approval after 30 days. I had documentation of everything. My computer's whirred back to life, and I managed to reconnect with my client. "Sorry about that," I said, adjusting my headset. "Power outage, but I'm back." "No problem," he responded. "That's why I love working with professionals who plan ahead." Little did I know that my planning ahead was about to become someone else's problem, specifically the problem of one Brenda Carmichael, the president of the Saguaro Springs HOA and the biggest pain in my backside since I had moved here 3 years ago. Brenda was 52 years old, with that particular blonde bob haircut that seemed to be required for HOA board members across America. She drove a white Lexus SUV, carried a designer handbag everywhere, and treated the HOA bylaws like they were constitutional amendments. Every interaction I had with her felt like a negotiation with someone who fundamentally believed that rules existed to make her life more comfortable, and everyone else's life more complicated. I finished my call around 4 in the afternoon. The power was still out across the entire neighborhood. I could see my neighbors starting to emerge from their houses, sweating in the Arizona heat, looking miserable. The temperature outside was pushing 108 degrees, and without air conditioning, these houses turned into ovens fast. I felt a twinge of guilt running my AC off the generator while everyone else suffered, but I had work to do. I had invested in backup power for exactly this reason. It wasn't my fault that other people hadn't planned ahead. Around 5:30, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Brenda standing there, accompanied by 2 other HOA board members I recognized, Patricia something and Margaret something else. They traveled in packs, I had noticed. Safety in numbers when enforcing ridiculous rules. "Wesley," Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We need to talk about your generator." "What about it?" I asked, already feeling my blood pressure rising. "It's creating a disturbance," she said, consulting her phone like she was reading from a script. Section 12.4 of the HOA bylaws states that noise disturbances are prohibited between the hours of 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. on weekdays, and at all times when they exceed 75 decibels. "It's 5:30 in the afternoon," I pointed out. "And the generator is well within noise limits. I had it tested when I bought it. Champion generators run at about 68 decibels from 25 feet away." Brenda's smile tightened. "Be that as it may, we've received complaints." "From who?" I asked. "That's confidential," Patricia chimed in. Of course it is, I muttered. Look, there's a power outage. I have work to do. The generator stays on. Actually, Brenda said, pulling out a piece of paper, I've been reviewing your file, and I don't see any approved application for generator installation on your property. I submitted it 6 months ago, I said. Automatic approval after 30 days. I have the certified mail receipt. We never received it, Brenda said smoothly. That's weird because I have proof of delivery signed by someone named Janet at the HOA office. Janet is no longer with us, Margaret offered. That's not my problem, I said. I followed the rules. The generator is legal, it's properly installed, and it's staying on. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. I closed the door, perhaps a bit harder than necessary. Through the window, I watched the three of them huddle together on my driveway, whispering and glancing back at my house. Finally, they left, and I returned to my office. The power came back on around 8 p.m. I shut down the generator, pleased with how well it had performed. My client work was complete, my servers had stayed online, and I hadn't lost a single file. The generator had paid for itself in just one afternoon. I went to bed that night feeling victorious, completely unaware of what the next morning would bring. When I woke up Wednesday, I had my usual routine: coffee, shower, check emails, and then head out to the backyard to inspect the generator. I liked to check it after each use, make sure everything was functioning properly, wipe off any dust. Except when I opened the back door, the generator was gone. I stood there, coffee mug in hand, staring at the empty concrete pad like maybe I had forgotten where I put a 150-pound piece of equipment. The heavy-duty power cable I had used was there, neatly coiled. The weatherproof cover was there, folded beside the pad. But the generator itself had vanished. My first thought was theft. We lived in a gated community, but gates didn't stop determined criminals. I immediately went back inside and called the non-emergency police line. "Phoenix PD, how can I help you?" "I'd like to report a theft," I said. "Someone stole my generator out of my backyard overnight." The dispatcher took my information and said an officer would be by within a few hours. Phoenix PD was stretched thin, and a stolen generator wasn't exactly a priority compared to the usual crime in a city of 1.7 million people. While I waited, I checked my security camera. I had a Ring camera on my back porch, but I hadn't activated the monitoring for the backyard area because it was completely fenced. That was mistake number one. The camera had motion detection, but I had turned it off because the palm trees in my yard kept triggering false alerts. Frustrated, I decided to ask my neighbors if they had seen anything. My next-door neighbor, Tom, was a retired airline pilot who seemed to notice everything happening on our street. "Tom," I called over the fence, "did you see or hear anything weird last night?" Tom walked over, watering hose in hand. "Like what?" "Someone stole my generator." "Right out of my backyard." His eyebrows shot up. "No kidding. What time?" "Sometime between 8 p.m. when I went inside and 7 a.m. when I noticed it missing." "I didn't hear anything," Tom said, frowning. "But then again, my hearing isn't what it used to be. That's a heavy piece of equipment. Must have taken at least 2 people to move it." "That's what I'm thinking. You call the cops?" "Yeah, they're sending someone over." Tom nodded sympathetically. "That's rough, man, especially with these power outages. You need backup power in this heat." The police officer arrived around 11 a.m. His name was Officer Rodriguez, a tired-looking guy in his 30s who had probably already dealt with a dozen problems worse than mine that morning. "Mr. Barnes," he said, notepad ready. "That's me. Thanks for coming." I showed him the backyard, explained about the generator, showed him the empty concrete pad and the remaining accessories. He took notes, asked about the serial number, which thankfully I had registered, and inquired about any enemies I might have. Enemies, I repeated. Anyone who might want to target you specifically. This is a gated community. Random theft is less common here. I hesitated, then said, I had a run-in with the HOA president yesterday. She wanted me to turn off my generator during the power outage. Officer Rodriguez looked up from his notepad. The HOA president wanted you to not have power during an outage. Essentially, yeah. She said it was against the rules, but it wasn't. I had all the proper documentation. What's her name? Brenda Carmichael. She lives 3 streets over on Mockingbird Lane. He wrote that down. I'll make a note of it. Got any proof of purchase for the generator? I pulled up the receipt on my phone, showing him the date, model number, and price. He took photos of everything, including the serial number documentation. All right, Mr. Barnes, I'll file this report. Keep an eye on online marketplaces, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, that kind of thing. Thieves often try to flip stolen goods quickly. If you see your generator listed, don't confront the seller. Call us immediately. Will do. What are the chances of actually getting it back? Officer Rodriguez gave me a sympathetic look. I'll be honest with you, property theft recovery rates aren't great. But with the serial number and recent purchase, you've got a better chance than most. I'll circulate the information to pawn shops and our stolen property database. After he left, I spent the afternoon fuming and searching online marketplaces. Nothing showed up. I called my insurance company, who informed me that theft was covered under my homeowner's policy, minus $1,000 deductible. Great. So I would lose $1,000 because someone decided my property was theirs. Thursday morning arrived with another power outage, this time caused by equipment failure, according to the emergency alert on my phone. The temperature was forecast to hit 112 degrees. Without my generator, I was going to lose a full day of work, and I had 3 client deliverables due by Friday. I sat in my sweltering house, laptop battery draining, contemplating my options. I could go to a coffee shop, but they'd probably be packed with everyone else who lost power. I could try to work from my car with the AC running, but that was just sad. That's when I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. Maybe some fresh air would help me think, despite the heat. I grabbed a water bottle and headed out. Saguaro Springs was laid out in a series of winding streets with southwestern names: Cactus Way, Desert Vista, Roadrunner Court, and so on. The houses were all stucco, most painted in earth tones with red tile roofs and desert landscaping. The HOA mandated specific paint colors and plant selections. You couldn't even change your front door color without approval. I walked past suffering neighbors, everyone sitting on their front porches trying to catch a breeze. Several people called out to me, complaining about the power situation. The utility company was estimating 6 to 8 hours before restoration. As I turned onto Mockingbird Lane, I heard something that made me stop in my tracks. The distinctive hum of a generator, not just any generator, a generator that sounded exactly like mine. I followed the sound, my pulse quickening. It was coming from a house at the end of the cul-de-sac, a large 2-story with an elaborate front yard full of fountain grass and red yucca. The house number was 4287. I walked closer, trying to locate the source of the sound. It was definitely coming from the backyard. The house looked familiar, and then I remembered why. I had been to an HOA meeting here once. This was Brenda Carmichael's house. My heart started pounding. There was no way. It was too brazen, too stupid. But then again, people did stupid things all the time, especially people who thought they were above the rules. I walked up to the side gate, which was tall and wooden, impossible to see through. The generator sound was loud now, definitely coming from the backyard. I stood there debating what to do. I couldn't just barge into someone's backyard. That was trespassing. But if my generator was back there, I pulled out my phone and called Officer Rodriguez. It went to voicemail. I left a message explaining what I had found and asked him to call me back urgently. Then I walked around to the front door and rang the bell. Brenda answered after a moment, looking cool and comfortable. Behind her, I could feel air conditioning pouring out of the house. "Wesley," she said with that same fake smile. "What can I do for you?" "Power's out again," I said casually. "Yes, I noticed. Seems like you've got power, though." "Oh, yes. My husband installed a whole house generator last year. Automatic transfer switch and everything. It kicks on immediately when the power goes out. Very convenient." "That's interesting," I said, "because I hear what sounds like a portable generator running in your backyard." Her smile faltered for just a second. "That's the whole house generator. It's located on the side of the house." "Can I see it?" "What? No. Why would you need to see my generator?" "Because mine was stolen 2 nights ago and I'd like to make sure yours isn't actually mine." Her expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation, Wesley. I think you should leave." "I've called the police," I said. "They're on their way." That was a slight exaggeration since I had only left a voicemail, but it had the desired effect. Brenda's face went pale, then flushed red. "You can't just go around accusing people of theft," she said. "I could sue you for slander." "It's only slander if it's not true," I pointed out. She started to close the door, but I heard another voice from inside. A man's voice saying, "Brenda, who is it?" "Nobody," she called back. "Just someone soliciting." "In a gated community," the voice said, getting closer. A man appeared behind Brenda. He was tall, balding, wearing golf clothes. This must be the husband, Richard Carmichael. He owned a car dealership in Scottsdale and was rarely home according to neighborhood gossip. "Richard," I said. "Wesley Barnes from Desert Vista. Someone stole my generator 2 nights ago and I believe it's currently running in your backyard." Richard looked confused. "What? Brenda, what's he talking about? We have a whole house generator." "He's confused," Brenda said quickly. "He's hearing our generator and getting mixed up." "Your whole house generator would be permanently installed on the side of your house," I said. "What I hear sounds like a portable generator in the backyard. Like my Champion 7500-watt model that disappeared Tuesday night after your wife told me I wasn't allowed to use it." Richard's confusion turned to concern. He looked at Brenda. "What's going on?" "Nothing," she said. "This man is delusional." "Then you won't mind if we all walk back there and look," I suggested. "You're not stepping foot on my property," Brenda snapped. Richard was now looking at his wife with suspicion. "Brenda, is there something I should know?" Before she could answer, a Phoenix PD patrol car pulled up to the curb. Officer Rodriguez stepped out along with another officer. "Mr. Barnes," Rodriguez said, walking up the driveway. "Got your message. What's the situation?" "My stolen generator is in this backyard," I said, pointing toward the house. Rodriguez looked at Brenda. "Madam, are you Brenda Carmichael?" "I am," she said stiffly. "You have a generator running in your backyard." "I have a whole house generator," she said. "That's not what I asked. Is there a portable generator in your backyard right now?" She hesitated just a beat too long. "No." "Mind if we take a look?" the other officer asked. "You have a warrant?" Brenda demanded. "Don't need one if you give consent," Rodriguez said. "But refusing consent when we have probable cause based on Mr. Barnes's report and the audible sound of a generator coming from your property gives us grounds to detain you while we obtain one." Richard stepped forward. "Officers, I give you consent to check the backyard. I have no idea what's going on, but let's clear this up right now." "Richard," Brenda protested. "Brenda, if there's nothing back there, there's nothing to worry about," he said, but his voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. We all walked around the side of the house, through a locked gate that Richard opened with a key. The backyard was impressive. A large covered patio, outdoor kitchen, and yes, a hot tub with steam rising from it despite the 100-plus-degree heat. And running next to the hot tub, connected by heavy-duty cables, was my generator. I recognized it immediately. Same model, same color, and when I walked closer, I could see the distinctive scuff mark on the side panel where I had accidentally scraped it against my garage door frame when I first bought it. "That's my generator," I said. Officer Rodriguez walked over and examined it. "You remember the serial number?" I pulled it up on my phone and read it off. Rodriguez checked the generator, wiping dust off the identification plate. "That's a match," he confirmed. Everyone turned to look at Brenda. Her face had gone from red to white. "I can explain." "Please do," Richard said quietly, and he sounded furious. "The HOA has rules about generators," she started. "He was violating noise ordinances and it wasn't approved, and I was just going to hold it until the matter could be resolved properly." "You stole it," I said flatly. "I borrowed it," she corrected. "I was going to give it back." "While using it to power your hot tub during a heat wave," Rodriguez observed. "I need my hot tub for medical reasons," Brenda said desperately. "My back, I have chronic pain, and the temperature regulation is important for my therapy." "You stole a man's generator during a power outage to run your luxury hot tub," the second officer said, sounding disgusted. "Madam, I'm going to need you to turn around." "What? No, you don't understand," Brenda said, backing up. "Mrs. Carmichael," Rodriguez said firmly. "You're under arrest for theft. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." "Richard!" Brenda shrieked, looking at her husband. Richard just stood there, arms crossed, looking at his wife like he had never seen her before. "How did you even move it?" "That thing weighs over 100 pounds. "I had help," she admitted. "Who?" Rodriguez asked, handcuffs now on Brenda's wrists. She pressed her lips together, then said, "Patricia and Margaret. The other 2 HOA board members, of course." "Full names and addresses," Rodriguez said, pulling out his notepad. Brenda gave up Patricia's information. Patricia Donovan from Sagaro Circle. Margaret's full name was Margaret Foster, living on Roadrunner Court. "We'll need to follow up with them," Rodriguez told his partner. "Call for another unit." While they processed Brenda, reading her rights and calling for backup, Richard pulled me aside. "I'm sorry," he said. "I had no idea. I've been working crazy hours at the dealership, and I knew the HOA stuff was getting out of hand, but I never thought she'd do something like this." "Did you know she was using my generator?" I asked. I knew the hot tub was working, but she told me the whole house generator was keeping it going. "We do have one, by the way. It's around the other side of the house, but it's been having issues. I've been meaning to get it serviced." He ran a hand over his face. "God, this is embarrassing." "It's not your fault," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed that entirely. "You didn't steal it." "No, but I'm married to someone who did. That says something about my judgment." We watched as Brenda was escorted to the patrol car. She was crying now, mascara running down her face, still trying to explain that she had meant to return it, that it wasn't really stealing, that the HOA rules gave her authority to confiscate items. "You're the HOA president, not law enforcement," Rodriguez told her. "You can't just take people's property." Another patrol car arrived, and the officers headed off to pick up Patricia and Margaret. I stayed behind to reclaim my generator. With Richard's help, we disconnected it from his hot tub and loaded it into my truck. "I really am sorry," Richard said again as I secured the straps. "Is there anything I can do?" "Make sure she doesn't retaliate," I said. I don't trust the HOA board not to suddenly find violations with my property. I'll make sure the board knows what happened, Richard promised. And between you and me, I think this might be the wake-up call the community needs. The HOA has been overstepping for years. I drove home with my generator safely in the truck bed. By the time I got it reinstalled in my backyard, the power had come back on, which was almost funny. But at least I knew I had it for the next outage. Over the next few days, the neighborhood grapevine worked overtime. Patricia and Margaret were also arrested and charged with theft conspiracy. All three women were facing criminal charges, and the HOA board was in chaos. I learned from Tom that Patricia had confessed almost immediately, saying Brenda had convinced them that confiscating the generator was within their authority as board members, that I was in violation of multiple rules, and that they were just enforcing community standards. Margaret stuck to that story too, but the police weren't buying it. Theft was theft, regardless of what authority you thought you had. The local news picked up the story. HOA president arrested for generator theft during power outage. It was perfect headline material, hitting all the right notes. Abuse of power, petty tyranny, and the chaos of an Arizona heat wave. A reporter even came to my house for an interview, but I declined. I didn't want to be the face of this story. I just wanted my generator back and to be left alone. The HOA held an emergency meeting the following week. I attended, along with about 60 other homeowners, which was 3 times the usual turnout. The remaining board members who weren't facing criminal charges looked shell-shocked. The meeting was held at the community center, in a room that was barely big enough for everyone. People were standing along the walls, and the air conditioning struggled to keep up with all the body heat. The interim president, a nervous man named Gary who had been the treasurer, stood at the front table with a microphone. "Thank you all for coming," Gary began. "As you know, we've had some significant developments with the board leadership, and we're here tonight to address community concerns." "Concerns?" someone shouted from the back. "Your president stole from a homeowner." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "Yes," Gary said, clearing his throat. "That's an ongoing legal matter, and we can't comment on it specifically, but I want to assure everyone that the board takes this situation very seriously." "The board?" Tom stood up, and I was glad to see him. "The board was part of the problem. 3 board members committed a crime. That's not a few bad apples, that's a systemic issue." Applause broke out. Gary looked overwhelmed. "What would you have us do? Resign?" someone called out. "All of you," another person added. "And we need new elections," Tom continued, "with better oversight. This HOA has been out of control for years. This theft is just the most extreme example." I raised my hand and Gary pointed at me nervously. "Yes, Wesley," I stood. "I want to know what rules the board has been enforcing that aren't actually in the bylaws. Because Brenda told me my generator was against the rules, but when I checked, it wasn't. How many other homeowners have been told they're in violation of rules that don't exist?" The room erupted in conversation. People started sharing their own stories. Being fined for lawn decorations that weren't prohibited. Being told they couldn't paint their door a certain color when that color was on the approved list. Being hassled about parking their own cars in their own driveways. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, the entire board had agreed to resign, and temporary oversight was established by a committee of 5 homeowners, including Tom. New elections were scheduled for 6 weeks out, with revised bylaws up for community vote. I drove home that night feeling vindicated but exhausted. This was more drama than I had wanted in my life. I just wanted to work from home, mind my own business, and have backup power during outages. The legal process moved forward. Brenda, Patricia, and Margaret were each charged with felony theft because the generator's value exceeded $1,000. Their lawyers tried various defenses. They thought they had authority, they intended to return it. It was a civil matter, not criminal. None of it worked. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Ortiz, was not sympathetic. I had a meeting with her about a month after the theft in her office downtown. "Mr. Barnes," she said, shaking my hand, "thank you for coming in. I want to go over your testimony for the preliminary hearing." "Whatever you need," I said. She pulled out a file. "Walk me through the timeline again. When did you first have contact with Mrs. Carmichael about the generator?" I recounted the whole story. Tuesday's power outage, Brenda showing up at my door with her entourage, the confrontation about the bylaws, finding it missing Wednesday morning, hearing it at her house Thursday, the police involvement. "And you're certain the generator found at her residence was yours?" Ortiz asked. "Positive. Same serial number, same scuff mark. Plus, she essentially admitted it when the police confronted her." Ortiz nodded. "Her defense is going to argue that, as HOA president, she believed she had authority to confiscate property in violation of community rules. What's your response to that?" "The generator wasn't in violation," I said. "I submitted proper documentation 6 months prior." "Even if it had been in violation, the HOA doesn't have the authority to enter my property and seize anything. That's not how HOA enforcement works." "Exactly," Ortiz said, smiling. "The bylaws specify fines and liens for violations, not property seizure. She had no legal authority whatsoever. And the fact that she used your property for her personal benefit while you were without power during an extreme heat event makes this particularly egregious." "What are they facing?" I asked. "Each defendant is charged with theft, criminal conspiracy, and trespassing. Mrs. Carmichael has additional charges for filing a false report because she initially told police she didn't have any portable generator. If convicted on all counts, she's looking at 3 to 5 years." I whistled. "That seems harsh for a generator." "It's not just about the generator," Ortiz said. "It's about abuse of authority, violation of trust, and the fact that your generator was essential equipment during a public safety emergency. Arizona takes heat-related crimes seriously. People die in this heat. Depriving someone of their backup power during a heat wave could have had serious consequences." I hadn't thought about it that way. I had been focused on my work, my property, my rights. But she was right. If I had been elderly, or had a medical condition, or had small children, being without power in 112-degree heat could have been deadly. The preliminary hearing was held in mid-July, about 6 weeks after the theft. I had to testify, which meant sitting in a courtroom downtown, wearing a suit in the summer heat, waiting for my name to be called. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, and less dramatic than TV shows made them look. Judge Martinez presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who seemed unimpressed with everyone. When I was called to the stand, I swore to tell the truth and sat down. Ortiz asked me questions about the timeline, about my generator, about the confrontation with Brenda. I answered clearly and concisely, sticking to the facts. Then Brenda's lawyer, a slick-looking guy named Davidson, cross-examined me. "Mr. Barnes," he began, "you testified that you submitted documentation to the HOA for your generator 6 months ago." "Yes." "But you also testified that you never received formal approval." "I received automatic approval per the bylaws, which state that failure to respond within 30 days constitutes approval." "That's your interpretation," Davidson said. "My client interpreted it differently." "Your client wasn't the one who made the decision to install the generator," I pointed out. I followed the rules as written, But you admit there was ambiguity. No, I don't admit that. The bylaws are clear. Davidson tried several more approaches, suggesting I was running the generator excessively, that it was louder than I claimed, that I was being uncooperative with the HOA. I countered each point with facts. The generator met noise requirements. I only used it during outages. I had provided all requested documentation. Finally, he asked, "Isn't it true that you had ongoing conflicts with Mrs. Carmichael before this incident?" "Define conflicts," I said. "She sent me letters about my grass being a quarter-inch too long once. She complained about my garbage cans being visible from the street for 10 minutes after pickup. If that counts as conflicts, then yes." Some people in the courtroom chuckled. Judge Martinez gave them a look and silence returned. "No further questions," Davidson said, looking frustrated. After I stepped down, the police officers testified about finding the generator at Brenda's house. Officer Rodriguez described her initial denial, then her admission, then her attempts to justify the theft. Patricia and Margaret's lawyers tried to distance their clients from the crime, suggesting they were just following Brenda's lead, that they didn't know it was illegal. But the prosecutor had text messages between the three women, obtained through a search warrant, discussing the confiscation and how they would teach that arrogant man a lesson. Those texts were damning. They showed premeditation, showed that all three knew what they were doing was questionable, and showed that their motive was partly punitive. I wasn't being targeted because of rule violations. I was being targeted because I had stood up to Brenda. Judge Martinez ruled that there was sufficient evidence for the case to proceed to trial. All three defendants remained free on bail, but they were prohibited from serving in any HOA capacity and were required to stay away from my property. The trial was set for October, giving the lawyers time to prepare. In the meantime, life in Saguaro Springs slowly returned to normal, or a new version of normal. The HOA elections happened in August. Tom ran for president and won by a landslide. Several other homeowners who had been vocal about reform joined the board. Their first act was to hire an attorney to review all the bylaws and create a simplified, clearer version. Tom stopped by my house one evening after the election results came in. "Congratulations, Mr. President," I said, handing him a beer on my back patio. "Thanks," he said, settling into a chair. "Never thought I'd be doing this at my age, but somebody has to clean up the mess. What's the plan?" "First, we're going to audit every fine and violation letter sent out in the last 3 years. If people were fined for fake violations, we're refunding them. Second, we're rewriting the bylaws to make them actually readable and sensible. Third, we're implementing oversight so no one person can make unilateral decisions." "Sounds good," I said. "Need any help, actually, yeah. You're good with documentation and technical stuff. Want to be on the bylaws review committee?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted nothing to do with the HOA ever again. But another part recognized that this was a chance to make things better, to prevent future Brendas from abusing their power. "Sure," I said. "Count me in." Over the next 2 months, I spent several evenings a week working with other homeowners to revise the community bylaws. We cut out ambiguous language, removed outdated rules, and added clear appeal processes for violations. We specified exactly what authority the board had and, more importantly, what authority it didn't have. One rule we added explicitly: the HOA could not confiscate, seize, or otherwise take possession of homeowner property under any circumstances. Violations would be addressed through fines, liens, or legal action only. October arrived, and with it the trial. All three defendants had rejected plea deals, insisting they would be vindicated by a jury. It was a gamble and not a smart one in my opinion. The trial lasted 4 days. The prosecution presented the evidence methodically. The timeline, the police reports, the text messages, my testimony, the officer's testimony, and even testimony from Richard Carmichael, who said his wife had lied to him about where the generator came from. The defense tried to paint me as an unreasonable homeowner who had refused to cooperate with legitimate HOA authority. They brought in a supposed HOA expert who testified about the challenges of managing communities and enforcing rules. But on cross-examination, even he admitted that property seizure was never an appropriate enforcement tool. The text messages were the prosecution's strongest evidence. Reading them aloud in court, they sounded even worse than I had imagined. Brenda. He thinks he can just ignore us. We need to take action. Patricia, what kind of action? Brenda, I'm going to confiscate that generator. Let him try to complain then. Margaret, can we do that? Brenda, I'm the president. I have authority to enforce community standards. Patricia, when should we do it? Brenda, tonight. After dark, he won't even notice until morning. And later, after the theft. Brenda, the generator is running my hot tub perfectly, serves him right. Margaret, what if he reports it stolen? Brenda, he won't. He's too proud to admit someone took it from under his nose. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, all 3 defendants were found guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I attended, wanting to see this through to the end. Judge Martinez reviewed each defendant's record. Patricia and Margaret, both first-time offenders, received 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and restitution to me for the cost of the generator plus my insurance deductible. Brenda, who had prior misdemeanor convictions for harassment and vandalism from years ago, and who had lied to police, received 18 months in county jail, 5 years of probation upon release, 500 hours of community service, and the same restitution payments. Mrs. Carmichael, Judge Martinez said, you held a position of trust in your community and you abused it. You targeted a homeowner not because he violated rules, but because he stood up to you. You stole his property during an emergency situation and used it for your personal luxury. This court takes such abuse of authority seriously. You'll have plenty of time to reflect on your choices. Brenda's lawyer requested she remain free pending appeal. Judge Martinez denied it. Brenda was taken into custody immediately, crying as bailiffs led her away. I left the courthouse feeling strange. I had won in every sense. My generator was back, the criminals were punished, the HOA was reformed. But there was no triumph in watching a woman being led away in handcuffs, even a woman who had made my life difficult. Richard Carmichael caught up with me in the parking lot. Wesley, wait, he called. I stopped, turning to face him. I wanted to apologize again, he said, and to let you know that I'm filing for divorce. I can't stay married to someone who would do what she did. The person I thought I knew wouldn't have stolen from a neighbor and lied about it. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. Don't be. This revealed who she really is. Better to know now than keep living in ignorance. He paused. I'm also moving out of Saguaro Springs. Too many memories. But I wanted to thank you for standing up to her. If you hadn't, she would have kept escalating, and who knows what she would have done next. We shook hands and he walked away. I never saw him again, though I heard later that he sold the house and moved to Flagstaff for a fresh start. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. The reformed HOA board was actually functional, addressing real issues like street maintenance and security without harassing homeowners about trivial nonsense. Tom turned out to be an excellent president, treating the position as a service to the community rather than a power trip. I continued working from home, and my generator continued sitting on its concrete pad, ready for the next power outage. When those outages came, as they inevitably did in the Arizona heat, I ran my generator without fear of harassment or theft. Several neighbors came to me for advice on buying their own backup power systems. I helped them select appropriate models, showed them proper installation, and even helped them fill out the new, simplified HOA approval forms that Tom's board had created. The forms were 2 pages long, with clear criteria, and approval was granted within a week if all requirements were met. The neighborhood changed in subtle ways. People seemed more relaxed, more friendly. Without the constant threat of violation letters and arbitrary fines, homeowners could actually enjoy their properties. Some people painted their front doors in new approved colors. Some added yard decorations. The community started feeling like a community instead of a police state. I ran into Patricia at the grocery store about 6 months after the trial. She was wearing a vest identifying her as a volunteer at the food bank, presumably working off her community service hours. When she saw me, she looked mortified. "Wesley," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology." "You already paid restitution," I said. "We're square." "No, we're not. Money doesn't fix what we did." She took a breath. "I've been thinking a lot about why I went along with Brenda." I told myself I was enforcing rules, being a good board member. But really, I just liked feeling important. I liked having power over other people. The judge made me see a therapist as part of my probation, and she helped me understand that I was part of something toxic. "Are you doing okay?" I asked because she looked genuinely remorseful. "Better than I deserve to be," she said. "I'm learning to be a better person. It's harder than I thought it would be." We talked for a few more minutes. She told me about her community service work, about how it had opened her eyes to real problems in the community, problems that made HOA disputes seem ridiculous by comparison. She asked about my work, and I told her about some projects I had completed. When we parted ways, I felt something shift. Forgiveness, maybe, or at least understanding. She had done a stupid, wrong thing, but she was trying to make it right. That counted for something. I never saw or heard from Brenda again after her sentencing. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she served her full 18 months without early release, lost her house in the divorce, and moved out of state after her release. I hoped she learned something from the experience, but I honestly didn't care enough to follow up. My life moved on. I took on new clients, grew my consulting business, and eventually hired an assistant to help with administrative tasks. I even started dating someone, a teacher named Bethany Carter who lived 2 neighborhoods over and had her own HOA horror stories. We bonded over shared experiences of petty bureaucracy and power-hungry board members. One evening, about a year after the trial, Bethany and I were sitting on my back patio when the power went out again. I walked over to the generator, primed it, and pulled the starter cord. It roared to life immediately, that familiar, comforting sound. "Your security blanket," Bethany teased. "My $2,000 security blanket," I corrected. "Best investment I ever made. Because of the backup power. Because it taught me to stand up for myself," I said. I could have just let Brenda bully me into turning it off that first day. I could have let her confiscate it without fighting back. But I stood my ground, and it made a difference, not just for me but for the whole neighborhood. "Tom says you're a hero," Bethany said. "Tom exaggerates." "I'm just a guy who wanted to use his own property in peace." That's the most American thing I've ever heard. We laughed, and I went inside to make sure all my systems were properly running off backup power. My computers hummed along, my refrigerator stayed cold, and my air conditioning kept the house comfortable. Everything worked exactly as it should. Looking back, the whole situation was absurd. An HOA president stole my generator to run her hot tub during a heat wave, got caught by police, and went to jail. It sounded like a headline from a satirical news site. But it had happened, all of it, and it had changed my perspective on community governance, property rights, and the importance of accountability. The new HOA board occasionally asked for my input on technical matters or policy decisions. I remained involved at a comfortable distance, contributing without taking on too much responsibility. Tom and his team were doing fine without me micromanaging, but they valued having homeowners who paid attention and spoke up when something seemed wrong. That was the real lesson from everything that happened. Communities work best when people participate, when they hold leaders accountable, when they refuse to accept abuse of authority just because it's coming from someone with a title. My generator sat on its concrete pad, properly maintained and ready for service. I tested it monthly, changed the oil on schedule, and kept spare parts on hand. It had become more than just backup power. It was a symbol of self-sufficiency and the right to be left alone. During the next summer's heat wave, multiple extended power outages hit Phoenix. My generator ran for hours at a time, keeping me cool and productive. Neighbors who had bought their own generators based on my recommendation stayed comfortable too. Those who hadn't yet invested in backup power sat in the heat, but without the added insult of having their equipment stolen by power-hungry HOA board members. Tom's board established a community emergency plan that included recommendations for backup power, water storage, and communication during outages. They worked with the city to improve our grid infrastructure and pressured the utility company to upgrade failing equipment. It was the kind of practical, useful governance that people actually needed. I never regretted filing that police report, never regretted pursuing the case against Brenda and her accomplices. Some people said I should have just taken the generator back and let it go, that criminal charges were excessive. But theft is theft, and abuse of authority has consequences, and sometimes people need to face those consequences to understand that their actions were wrong. The generator continued to run during that power outage, its steady hum a reminder that I had power in more ways than one. Electrical power to run my home, purchasing power to buy what I needed, and personal power to stand up against people who thought they could push me around. As the sun set over Phoenix and the temperature finally dropped below 100 degrees, I shut down the generator and plugged back into grid power. The house remained cool, my work remained secure, and my property remained mine. That was all I had ever wanted. That was all I had fought for. And in the end, despite the drama, the theft, the legal battles, and the community upheaval, I had won. Not because Brenda went to jail, not because the HOA board was replaced, but because I could sit in my own backyard, in my own home, with my own generator, and know that nobody could take it away from me again. The neighborhood lights flickered back on as grid power was restored. All around Saguaro Springs, air conditioning units hummed back to life. People emerged from their homes relieved. Some waved to neighbors. Others just went back inside, grateful to return to normal. I stayed outside a little longer, enjoying the evening air as it cooled. Bethany brought me a cold beer from the fridge. "Cheers," she said, clinking her bottle against mine. "To generators, to justice, and to never joining an HOA board." "I'll drink to that," I said, and I did.